Max Verstappen looks like he's on course to win the 2024 Drivers' World Championship in the car that is probably going to come third in the World Constructors' Championship.
That's right.
So does that mean that this is number one, Max Verstappen's greatest ever season? And number two, does that make him the greatest driver of all time? It's time to have that chat today. Let's go. So, Ammar, I'm going to open that question directly to you. Max is probably going to win the title. The car's probably going to come third in the championship on the constructors' side. Case closed, right? Max, greatest of all time, best season. Let's just
Well,
go home.
before we get into this debate, tired community, please like, please subscribe. Please hit the subscribe button if you have not already subscribed to our channel. Leave us a comment, hit a like, share the channel with whoever you can. Thank you. Let's get into it. You're doing this prisoner of the moment thing, but you said like three things to me. Max greatest of all time, his championship greatest of all time. Are we saying yes to both? Is that what we're
I don't
doing here?
know. I don't know. It's an open question.
So I think if Max wins this championship, I think it's fair to say that this is his best championship one to date. And I know what you're gonna say. 2021 was pretty epic, and it went down to the wire. And whatever the results might be. I'm probably going to evoke a lot of emotion with that season. But I think that the way the season has gone, with the things that were stacked against Max, right? That's sort of how I look at it. If you look at 2021 for a second, both Red Bull and Mercedes were going toe to toe with each other. And I think, depending on the race, engine modes, etc., driver capabilities on certain tracks, and them going wheel to wheel, that was an exciting season. But that was two teams going at it, two drivers going at it. I remember towards the latter part of the season, like people are moving out of their way just so the two of them could dig it out. And of course, we got what we got towards the end of the season, those last 5 laps, if you will, and that last lap for sure. But this season, right? While Red Bull looked like the dominant car coming in, while Max looked like the dominant driver that coming in, and up until Miami, they certainly proved to be that way. Only Max has shown to continue that dominance. He has won races that we could rattle off that he shouldn't win. Imola comes to mind, right? I mean, Brazil comes to mind right now. I mean, there's races in there that I can't even remember off the top of my head. But what's interesting is this season, he has had competition at various points in time from the McLarens, from the Ferraris, and even Mercedes every once in a while. And while Mercedes have not been able to do that consistently, you can definitely see the difference between what the two Ferraris and the two McLarens are able to do and what Red Bull is unable to do, except in the hands of Max, right? Max is sort of the magic elixir on all of this. Like if you solve all your problems just by throwing Max in there. So I think from that standpoint, I would value this season and I would sort of rank it as Max Verstappen's best championship season.
I'm going to make this really easy for you, man. This is basically a choice between, do you want to crown his greatest championship as the one where he fought greatness or the one where he fought mediocrity? And 2024 is mediocrity on such a huge scale.
Oh, come on.
In the drivers' championship, the driver he's going up against has made so many mistakes. And we've talked about it at length in this video. In fact, our last but one video was talking about whether or not we think Lando Norris can actually win a championship at all. Like, that's the driver that we're saying Max scored his greatest world championship result against. No, I don't think so. And I'm also talking about mediocrity from his own team. That's what he was fighting against. He's not really fighting anybody else. In this season, he's fighting against the fact that his Red Bull car isn't up to it. Whereas in 2021, he went up with everything he had against the greatest that's ever done it. And he came out on top. You know how hard I find that to say, but he came out on top. Right? That to me has to be the greatest championship of all time. I said it before and I'll say it again. Max Verstappen could have retired after Abu Dhabi 2021. His name is up there with the absolute greats of Formula One. He didn't need to do anything else. And as he has said, one title was enough. Everything after that is a bonus. And I agree with him, which is why 2024, as hard as it's been, is still a bonus for him because he hasn't had to go up
harder this
against
season.
because he hasn't had to go up against the greatest of all time in an absolutely
Okay.
when everything was going great guns on both sides. That has to
Okay,
be it.
so I partly agree with your assessment because I'm not going to take down Lewis Hamilton. I think that's what you're trying to bait me into a little bit. Yes, he was going up against greatness there, but guess what, Shez? Every race he was either going to finish first or second. There was no question about where he was going to finish on the grid. This season, really, there have been questions since Miami about where Max can win because of the way Red Bull, and you mentioned this, he had to fight Red Bull. That to me makes the season even greater because he didn't just have to fight Red Bull's mediocrity, he had to fight different drivers. You can say what you want about Lando
From
Norris,
when?
and
From
you can
when?
say
From
pretty
when?
much
When did he have
pretty
to?
much the whole season, right?
The
Miami onwards,
whole
you can say
season.
Miami
The whole
onwards.
season.
Miami on. And okay, by the way, you say that too, but we kind of forget this. But he had a DNF in Australia that had nothing to do with him, by the way. And he would have easily finished on the podium there. Maybe not a win. Who knows? Maybe a win, but that was a podium right there too. So I mean, take that into account because had he been able to finish that race, there wouldn't have been this championship battle anyway, right?
Do you think that Jenson Button had a particularly difficult championship run? Do you think that his championship was a particularly well fought one? Do you think that that was a very difficult championship and that he was a really deserving winner at the end of it?
I mean, I'm never going to take anything away from a driver that wins it, no matter how they do, because they have to do it over the course of a season. I wouldn't take it from Lando if he had won this year too, because you have to be able to do something consistently enough.
Which
If
he's
it's
not been
not the
able to do.
greatest, but great too. But he hasn't been able to, and that's fine. And look again. I think Jensen is a worthy winner. I wouldn't put him in the greatest, right?
Right, but
But there's a
why is
reason.
that championship
Well, because a lot of that
less
had to
than
just do
Max's?
with, yeah, but a lot of it had to do with double DRS, and there was more controversial stuff than there. Max has
There was no
genuinely
DRS
had,
in there was definitely no DRS in 2009.
well, I'm talking about the controversy with Braun coming onto the stage and them having an advantage for races and waiting
Yeah,
for
yeah. So
others
you
to
could
catch up.
argue that
That's what
Red
I'm
Bull
talking.
also had an advantage until everybody else caught up this
Yes,
year.
but
It's analogous, isn't it? What but the
it
circumstances might be different, but the result is the same.
fair enough. But the reason this is even greater is that you would not expect Red Bull to be anywhere close to. You could have argued in that season with Braun that they would still be competitive. Red Bull are
Well,
simply
they
not
weren't.
competitive.
They
Look at
weren't.
where
They
Checo
were
is.
the
They wouldn't even make it out of Q2 most of the time. Like this is how it is now.
Brawn were the third fastest car by the end of the season
By
in
the end of the
2009.
season,
Yeah.
the only reason Red
From
Bull
the
but the only reason Red Bull is the third fastest car is because Max is driving it. He is the reason for that. Otherwise, they are arguably
why
even behind Mercedes.
you're telling me that he's bending or breaking physics to make a car
Yes,
that
he
is the
is. I
third
don't know what
fastest
he's
car.
well,
Okay,
I
so
don't
you
know what
believe in
he's doing
magic.
there. I'm not knowledgeable enough to do that, but you can see the wide difference
No,
between him and
no.
Checo Perez. Like
No,
that gap is
there's a fact here, right? That you cannot go, your car cannot go faster than physics will allow it to go. So if that car is that fast, that's
I
how
mean,
fast
Shez,
it can go.
Shez, you are super informed. You're highly intelligent. You put words in there, and then now you're sort of defending that. My point is, what Max is doing
Right.
is something that his teammate cannot even come close to.
But he
Cannot even
also
come.
couldn't do it.
He
He
couldn't
also
come
couldn't in
close to
2021.
it. He couldn't, but that's the point. I mean, that's look,
Hold on.
my whole
What
thing
does
is
that
you
have to
think,
do with this title being greater than the one he had in 2021?
what did
Why does him having to fight his team or fight with a difficult car make it a greater championship than 2021 when he had to go up against the greatest there's ever been?
yeah, like I said, when he had to go back and forth with Lewis Hamilton, again, the question was them going against each other. It was a mano, a one-on-one type of situation. This has not been that. Whether you want to put qualifiers on all of the things that Max has had to cope with, they have existed. It's the dysfunction with Red Bull. It's the idea that he might leave. It's Adrian Newey leaving. It's Red Bull looking like they have no freaking clue how to improve the car mid-season. It's the fact that you had Ferrari come in and look great, even over the course of 5, 6 races, whatever. It's the fact that McLaren are the quickest car right now on the grid and have been for most of the season. I mean, we keep coming back to Lando should be winning. The only reason he is not winning is also because of how Max is doing. Yeah, but Shez, I would say the first title, I mean, this is not a and or for me, right? This is a 1A, 1B kind of situation. Whereas the first championship would have been whereas the first championship would have been very satisfying, you could say that he would be, like you said, he would be put in the greatest amongst the greatest, right? Now with this championship, having done it 4 consecutive years and to bookend these 4 championships, it really puts him in the greatest conversation, is what I mean. Not just merely being in the room. Now you can actually say, hey, does his 4 championships equal or in some ways be comparable to Lewis's 7 or Michael's 7? And I think by now he's surpassed. To me, he's now firmly in the top 3. Now you can decide how you want to kind of parse out the top 3, but he is right there with Lewis and Michael. And now we could have the discussion of, are his 4 greater than Lewis's 7 or Michael's 7? Different conversation for a different day. But my point is this season kind of puts it in that stratosphere.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that this season is better than 2021. It might be an additional footnote, but it's not the main event. The main event for me is 2021. Everything you've just said is still, yes, he had somebody else in a faster car, but that guy in a faster car wasn't good enough. Then you had another guy that was in a faster car, but that car wasn't fast enough for long enough.
Yeah, but Shez, we're talking about Max not even finishing in the top 10.
So Max has been the most consistent of all of the drivers that have been around. And he's also had a car that has been competitive for longer than any of the other cars. So that's why he's been able to build up the advantage that he has, because he's currently just defending a massive advantage that he built up at the beginning of the season. Whereas in 2021, every race counted. Every race was a little bit of jeopardy. And they couldn't put a foot wrong in any race at any time. That for me is true sporting greatness. This is basically just doing everything you can against a bunch of drivers that are just not good enough.
Yeah, but again, we're having the debate of quality versus quantity. You can say that, right?
Yeah.
My point to you is, since Miami, and Miami was the 5th or 6th race of the season, someone's going to correct me on it. There have been 18 races. There's pretty much been a whole season since then, right? So the lead at that point was roughly 60 points, 50 points, something in that region, right? You could have argued that over the course of the next 18 races, that could have been easily be wiped out. That was not a substantial lead by any stretch of the imagination.
Let's do this. Let's do this, because let's segue onto, is this the greatest championship because Max has had so much against him? So the Red Bull, right, may finish 3rd in the championship this season, in the Constructors Championship this season, right? But if you guys have followed our community pages, we posted a list of the top 4 cars in terms of super time, so the fastest cars across the entire season to date. So the average pace of each car. Which car do you think was the fastest on average across all races to date this season?
Maybe Ferrari or McLaren?
It was not. It was Red Bull. By a big fat chunk. By a massive chunk, it's been the fastest car.
Okay.
So tell me that Max hasn't had the quickest car this season.
No, he hasn't had the quickest car, Shez, because
he has.
The stat is only one thing. The stat is only one thing. You have to watch each race and tell me which of those races he should have been winning.
Okay. You want to do that?
He has had a stretch where he hasn't won 6 races up until he won in Brazil. And even that, as you have said, was aided by circumstances, which again does not take anything away from him. But my point is, we can bring those statistics, but they only say half the story.
How much more do you need to say?
Here's what you need to say. In 2021, the question was whether he could beat Lewis or not. In 2024, the question is whether for these last 18 or so odd races, could he even finish in the top 5? And he has consistently done that, even when he hasn't won races.
5. So the only race that he has won,
but he doesn't deserve to. But on merit, Shez, on paper, on merit, and the way the Red Bull has looked in comparison to the Ferrari and to the McLaren, and on certain occasions to the Mercedes, he has no business being in the top 6.
Ammar, you can say all of that stuff, right, about being in the top 6, but to win championships, you need to win races.
Which he did. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. And he won races when that car was clearly the quickest car on the grid. Clearly. In fact,
but he also won when it wasn't.
In fact, so quick was it that it was on. He never did that. The Super Times tell
Imola.
you that. Yeah, he was on pole. So
Okay.
by Super Times, he had the quickest car on the grid that day. That's a fact. That's a
I know what
fact.
you're saying.
And on wait, let me finish. So what I am trying to say here is that other than Brazil, he has not won a race this season in which his car was not on Super Times the fastest car on the grid that day. Now, I'm not saying that Max cannot win in a car that isn't the fastest, but to say that he hasn't had the fastest car and that wasn't the reason that he built up such a massive championship lead, I think is disingenuous.
Okay, so what is also disingenuous is strictly looking at super times and just equating it to winning. Like somehow that is supposed to translate into winning. We have seen time and time again that quickest cars don't equal victories just automatically. There is a lot more that goes into racing than just being the quickest on Saturdays, or for that matter, even on Sundays. And what I'm trying to tell you is, yes, you can look at the correlation between being the quickest car and winning races. Championships take
Yeah, yeah,
race
yeah,
wins,
yeah, yeah,
but
yeah,
what they
yeah.
also take is on your worst days, can you salvage the best possible positions? Can you salvage points? And Max is considering,
Yes,
and those to
yes,
me are
yes. He
as
is
critical as wins, because you're right. If when you have the quickest car and when you can be out there like Lando was in Singapore, sure, there's nothing to worry about there. But the reality is
so.
there, my point with saying that he shouldn't have been anywhere near the competition is that on paper, he should not have been able to keep up any kind of margin in his championship based on the way Red Bull
Okay,
have looked. And the fact that
Ammar,
he has done that makes it
no,
great. That's
no,
my
no,
point.
no. Yeah, it's a great championship, not his greatest, because what you're basically saying is that he has been a better driver on his bad days than Lando Norris has been on his. I didn't need a
I
championship
mean,
to
all
tell
of
you
the
that
grid,
that's
really. Yeah.
yeah.
But that's
I
what
didn't need
makes
to,
the
I
championship
didn't need to
great.
what I didn't need to watch the championship to know that that was what was going to happen. If when he did it against Lewis Hamilton in 2021, when Lewis Hamilton also didn't drop a beat, that means something.
I mean,
That
there was a
means
lot. I
something.
mean, I don't want to get into diagnosing 2021, but we're going to have to do that because there were some duds that Lewis Hamilton put up too,
Sure,
right? And
but
there
do
were,
you mean,
but
but
that's what
at
I'm
the
saying.
level that Lando Norris had?
But Chess, they're all different. They're all
And
different.
Lando Norris
I'm not.
has consistently been fumbling the bag consistently
But
this
it's not
season.
just Lando. You keep saying Lando as if that was the only thing.
Who else has been his challenger this
It's
year?
not about his direct competitor winning against him. It's about the
Okay. So
field
what is it then?
taking away his chances.
But
This is a different.
they
But
never had a
Chess, these
consistent
are
car.
different.
Amar, wait, they never had a car consistently ahead of the game like he had at the beginning of the season. So he had a car for an extended period of time. He had the fastest car and made use of it to win races. Lando Norris has had the fastest car and not won races. Do you understand that takes a little bit away from the
No, I
competition
don't
that
understand.
Max, do
I
you
don't
understand how
understand.
that
Because,
takes away the
no, because
competition that
I
Max
don't
has
agree
had
with the.
versus what he had in 2021?
So I don't agree with the super times in this case because in watching races and in having watched qualifying and watched all of these, I can the eye test also means something, right? That's what I'm saying. Statistics only tell you half the story.
Now the
And
eyes lie
what we're
here.
seeing consistently is, huh?
The eyes definitely lie here, and
No, the eye is lying.
I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why, man. Go watch it. There's a really good video. And like we promote no one, but you should go and watch it. Rocket
We
powered
confirm.
Rocket powered Mohawk did a brilliant video about Lando after the US Grand Prix, and we're talking about oh Lando sort of fumbling the bag, but having the quickest car. When Max and Lewis were fighting out, duking it out in 2021, they were finishing 30 seconds ahead of everybody else,
That's
right?
my point.
Ahead of everybody, including their teammates.
That's what I'm saying. That's near adjacent to saying
Lando Norris cannot even shake his teammate properly. So,
Shez,
so he's having just as much of a fight with his teammate as he is with Max Verstappen.
Shez.
So to me, that tells me that the competition that Max is having this season is not the same as the one he was having in 2021.
Okay, I take a different look at it. What you just said actually confirms to me what I'm thinking, which is exactly my point. When Lewis and Max were fighting it out, they were 30 seconds ahead of each other. So it was a question of battling just one person, one thing. That's all it
because they
took.
put themselves in that position.
But what we've seen this season is it has taken a lot more than just focusing on one element of winning the championship. It has taken a lot of overcoming of the car's inherent miscapabilities or shortcomings, if you will. It has taken a lot of strategizing on the pit wall that you have to give Red Bull credit for here. It
Oh
has
yeah,
taken a lot
yeah,
more.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so my point to you is when I look at the collective elements of what it has taken to win in 2024 versus what it took to win in 2021, which some would argue maybe wasn't even a championship, right? So if you kind of even put that there, right, this
What?
does
What do you mean
become
it
the
wasn't
greatest.
even a championship? What does that mean?
Well, I mean, this I'm speaking your mind here, but I mean it is a championship here. But my point is, he was working against one Lewis Hamilton. That's all he had to worry about. This
Because
year
he
he
had
has had
taken
to worry
himself.
about. But I know, but whatever
Because
the
Lewis has already
circumstance,
taken himself miles ahead of
but Shez,
his
the
teammate. Lando
circumstances are
can't
what they
even
are.
do that.
But the circumstances are what you compete against the
Correct.
people you
So
have.
this that but that's what we
That
but
doesn't
that's what we're
take away
talking
from your
about.
ability. But that
But
doesn't. But it's not like he's shown up, Max, and said, "Okay, I'm going to just beach the car in the gravel like Lance did in Brazil." Again, like, "Whoa, I just want to make this more interesting." That's
well,
not
to
the
be fair,
point.
he did do that.
Whatever your circumstances are within a season, they are what they are. You can't control what your competitors do.
Correct. But the
But this,
circumstances make the championship
yeah, but I'm not
greater
gonna.
or not as great.
But okay, so we fundamentally disagree on and then on our definition of greatness then, because to me, I'm evaluating the greatness of this season with the challenges that this season presented, and I think that the challenges that this season presented to Max, even though he had a good head start, it would have been very easy. I mean, look, Red Bull just fell off from being like dominant first place, falling to
But they
third in the championship.
won
And Max could
every
have
single
also,
race. They were
but
dominant other than Australia.
but Shez, just look at the fact that Red Bull have fallen so precipitously. And the reality is, if
What does
Mercedes
that
were
have to
even
do with
half
it?
good, even half,
But then
if they
they
would have been,
weren't. But
but
they weren't.
but but the thing is, but
So
even Max could
how can it
have.
be greater
Hang on,
if
let
the
me
teams
finish.
that should have been able
Let me
to
finish. Let me
go on?
finish. Red Bull fell from first to third, while Max has stayed in first place. That tells you everything you need to know about Max's season. He
But it
could have
also,
also fallen
Ammar,
along with them, maybe not to third, but he could have fallen to a second place. That's what I'm saying again.
Ammar,
Part
that
of it
also
depends
tells
on.
you how inconsistent his competitors have been. That says more about his competition than it does about him. Whereas in
Fair enough.
2021, his
Fair enough.
yes,
But you
fair
compete
enough. So
against who?
that means
But what
yeah,
what does
yeah,
that
yeah, yeah,
mean?
yeah, 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 yeah.
But
Are you not gonna let me finish?
go.
That tells you
Let
that
me
in
finish.
20, but I did let you finish. You had your point, and now I'm gonna retort. Because in
Gonna
2021,
get
his
upset.
competition did not drop the bag. On every parameter, Lewis and Mercedes were absolutely on it. And that's what Max had to fight. This year, he's having to fight McLaren, Mercedes, and Ferrari, all of whom at points have been fast, but none of whom have actually had the consistency to challenge him. That's why he's been able to hold
That
on
they
to the
have,
massive lead that he had at the beginning of the season.
Shaz.
No one's been able to overtake him because
It's
of that.
you
I
can
would argue the
say,
Jensen Buttons title was actually even better than this one
oh
because
no, we're not
because
again.
Red Bull were consistently the faster car over the second half of that season. They just ran out of races.
No,
Okay,
I'm not going to argue with you because you're not recognizing the point that I'm making. You keep saying the other drivers were inconsistent and the other teams were inconsistent.
yeah,
That is fair. But the point is, Max beat all of them consistently. So he did his part.
but he
Whether they
hasn't
would have
beaten them
been,
consistently.
well,
Those other
hang on. Let
drivers
me
have been
finish now.
finishing ahead of him, and he's
Let
been
me finish.
finishing, as you said, fifth or sixth. That's not beating them.
What I'm saying,
That's
he
just
has
driving to the
consistently
level of
beaten
the
them.
car.
He has consistently. I mean, he was second at times where he shouldn't have been second. He's been on
Was
podiums
he
where
was he was he
that's my
second in
point.
Monza?
Huh?
Was he second in Baku?
He wasn't second. Well, what was he in Austin?
Right, but
What was he in Mexico? What was he in
where
Brazil?
I actually don't know. Where did he finish in Mexico? In Mexico, he finished
It's
like
like P4 or
fifth,
something. It's
sixth, didn't
P4,
he?
P5. My point is again, if you that the other
With his
drivers are
with his twenty
inconsistent
second penalty.
are not. Yeah, I know that was penalized. That was not. I kind of threw that in there. That Max did not have consistent competition cannot be held against his great season because he could have also fallen off with the car and he could have been inconsistent and he could have been right where Red Bull are, which is in a poo-poo hole. That's what they are in. And he bucked the trend of working against his own team, which to me is apples to apples fighting against.
He is a great driver.
Hang on,
yes,
hang on.
I
Which
totally
to
agree
me,
with that.
working with this version of the Red Bull is as good as competing with one of the greatest. That's what I'm saying. And then now you add everything else around it.
And I absolutely disregard
we have to
that
agree to disagree.
because it's wrong. And I do want to quickly just hit on this. The car is the third fastest in the Constructors Championship. Okay, look, yes, it is third in the Constructors, but as I've shown you on super times alone, it is the quickest car. So we do need to have a little look at where this car stands in terms of how its drivers have used it, right? Do you want to have a little guess? Who's had the closest delta in terms of a driver pairing in the top four this season?
I'm guessing
Ferrari,
McLaren,
McLaren, Mercedes, and Red Bull. Who's been closest?
Leclerc and
Within a
Sainz have
team,
been
who's
close to
closest?
each other.
Yeah, so Ferrari are closest. Who's been second?
I'm guessing either Mercedes or McLaren, maybe, or
No,
Mercedes.
Mercedes.
Yeah.
Right. So the gap has been less than a tenth between the Ferrari drivers. It's been about just under 2/10 for the Mercedes drivers. Who's third?
McLaren.
Yeah. By about 2.5 tenths. And by a whopping 5.5 tenths,
Red Bull.
Red Bull. So
but that's my point. It's so great that says to you that Red Bull should be nowhere close to where he is at.
And Red Bull, between the two Red Bull drivers, they've got the worst head-to-head as well. I'm going to put the graph up for you guys to have a look at. It is on our community pages, but I'll post it up here now as well. Essentially, what you've got is Max Verstappen out-qualifying his teammate 20 times to 1.
Yeah.
And that is not all down to the car. That is down to Sergio Perez just not performing. And that is also the reason why they're not higher up in the Constructors' Championship.
I agree.
Tell me I'm wrong.
I agree with you. But again, this is a glass half full, glass half empty situation. You could argue that Sergio Perez is not performing as well as he should. And I would argue that the Red Bull,
correct,
the Red Bull minus in the hands of Max Verstappen are exactly where they should be. Max is doing a lot with the car, with his racecraft. That's my point. This is why
it's pace. It's pace.
Everything.
It's not
everything. No. It's if it is pace, then the delta would be a little bit better between the two drivers. Sergio Perez would at least be qualifying in Q3 consistently.
This is based on 1 lap pace. So it's not.
But it's on 1 lap. So, but again, this is correct. 1 lap.
So
Shez. You're making my point here. But when I'm going, this is going back to the question. If you evaluate greatness, it's not about 1 lap. It's about 50 laps, 60 or 70 or whatever is in the races.
Much easier to do well in a race when you start first or second than it is when you start 18th.
How many times has he started first? I'm going to say off the top of the head, not a whole lot. Maybe in the first part of the season.
No, that's not true. He had 7 poles in the first 7 races.
Yeah, that's what I said. Like first,
so he's got more pole positions than anybody else. Ammar, this is what I'm trying to tell you, man. He's getting this result off the back of the first half of this season. He's not winning this championship because he's done consistent races in the second half of the season.
What are you talking about? The first half of the season. There was another half of the season to defend. Where we disagree.
Correct.
But even that by itself is championship pedigree, Shez. It's not always about being on the top step of the podium.
Yeah. It's a great season. It's not great in 2021, though. Anyway, I think on that bombshell, it's probably time to end it. We've sat here and argued for a while. What do you guys think? Which one was Max Verstappen's greatest championship? Is it 2024? Is it 2021? Or are you an outlier and you actually think that 2023 was the greatest season that he has ever driven? Maybe you are. I don't know. As usual, please like, please subscribe. Please leave us a comment. We'll read every single one and we will reply to as many as we possibly can. And we will see you guys in the next one.
Later.